and then lower down, past 90 degrees, pause there, and then squeeze in again. So we get a maximum contraction and peak on that hamstring. Squeeze in and hold. That's good. And then we'll change legs. So, quite a nifty machine this, you just move the knee pad across and you're onto the other leg then. It's good if you've got an imbalance. Some people, obviously we treat a lot of patients that might have one hamstring weaker than the others, and sometimes bodybuilders are the same. They might have one leg stronger than the other. This gives them some idea and a means by which they can get the other leg up. This exercise is what we call a closed chain hamstrings. You might not have seen something like this before, but it works the hamstrings in the opposite direction. So basically the feet are fixed and their body's moving. So Charlotte's going to keep her body straight, and you can see the pad offering some resistance. The weights are counterbalanced down here, so you can add weight. If I take weight off there, it offers more resistance to the hamstrings, but you'll see the movement now. And again, she's going to come down slowly, keeping her back straight. And you can see there, it's locked in. She comes down there, the hamstrings are taking the load, and then she pulls on her ankles, on her heels really strongly, and engages the hamstrings on the way up. Okay, so down slowly again. Now if you wanted to mimic this movement in the gym, you could use, you could kneel on a bench, or you could kneel on a pad up against a pulley, and the pulley could offer some resistance, some counterbalance. So you could adapt that in the gym. So you'd actually be holding onto a pulley. The pulley would be pulling backwards with a weight that counterbalances the upper body weight, and then you can select the weight that you need and engage the hamstrings to come up. Okay. This exercise would be an alternative to doing the lying one, but I would combine this one with the kneeling one or the sitting leg curl if you're doing that maybe 1 week or for a few weeks at a time. You can mix and match if you want, but this one would take the place of that lying one. This exercise is a compound movement for the hamstrings. Again, I do prefer the isolation movements mainly, but this is an alternative again to a lying curl, which you could put in. This is a stiff-legged deadlift. She's using an overgrip on a Smith machine, sticking her bottom out, leaning forwards, slightly bent knees, never completely straight, and then trying to engage your hamstrings as she pulls up. So you're really focusing on this part rather than the back. But again, with it being a compound movement, she's using her back, her glutes and her hamstrings, but she's really trying to focus on this part of her hamstrings. It's a useful exercise as a compound movement, and maybe do it as an alternative every now and then. I think for the advanced trainer like Charlotte, you know, she gets a good mind-muscle connection with the hamstring if she likes the exercise. So I think if you can focus in on it and get that connection really strongly. It's a bit difficult for the beginners to focus on just that area when all the other areas have been engaged. With regard to the muscles on the inside of the thigh, a lot of bodybuilders don't directly work them. They'll rely on the squats and the leg press to hit them indirectly. But as I've always pointed out to people, that there are 4 muscles in that area, 2 of them quite major, quite large muscles that need to be hit directly. The only way you're going to hit them is to do the movement directly, the inner movements or the adduction movements of the legs, and that's bringing your thighs together. Okay, so we're going to hit them directly now. So unlike a lot of people who think it's just a girly exercise, this is still, see a big bodybuilder using it, you think, what's he doing? But this is really focusing on that inner range and the inside muscles now. So again, you see that he's contracting and holding on the inner part of the movement and then pausing at the end. So same style, no momentum, a pause at the end of the movement, so the muscles have to maximally contract to get that movement going again. Moving on to the calves now. So with the calf muscles, basically you've got 2 different muscles in the calf. You've got one that works over the knee, and attaches to the heel bone, and then you've also got one that attaches below the knee. So the one that works over the knee, the best way to train that is to train it with the knee extended, so with a straight leg. That's the gastrocnemius for the uninitiated, but that's the main calf muscle that's got two heads. The deeper muscle is called the soleus, and then we use a bent knee position to train that one. But also, we can also orientate the feet slightly to try and emphasise the inner and the outer heads of the calf. So we're going to do that as well. So starting off with this movement, you can do this in a standing position as well. You can use a standing calf machine, but either way, the knee's in a straight position. So with the knee in a straight position, you drop the toes down, so you've got a good stretch behind the heel. You feel the calf muscle stretching and then pushing outwards with the toes. So the foot's about halfway down the foot you place your toes on the foot plate. Knees are locked out. Pause at the bottom of the movement and then drive out using the calf. Now you can adapt that. He's using a position in the foot which would tend to hit the inner head. So he can turn his heels outwards slightly and have his knees bent, and he's now working the soleus muscle and the outer head of the calf. So that will be a good second exercise on the same machine. So you class that as two exercises. The first one with his knees straight, feet straight, and the second one with his heels out and his knees slightly bent. When you have your knees bent though, to stop engaging your quads too much, you have to fix your knees or lock your knees together. That's it. Get a good stretch and pause and then drive out again. Some gyms have a kneeling calf machine, and that would be the movement you'd use instead of doing that one. But again, you can use an incline leg press machine like this, and it's a really good way of doing your calves. Moving on to shoulders now. So when you look at the shoulder anatomically, it's got three heads. It's got an anterior front head, a side deltoid head, and a rear head. Okay, so basically we want to isolate all three heads if we can. Now when it comes to pressing movements tend to put more emphasis on the front head, but also engage the other two heads as well. So, and it's a compound movement using other muscles as well to engage, to try and but you're trying to focus on the prime mover. So you've got a few other muscles working. In the pressing movement, you've got the triceps working and the shoulders working. So I usually recommend just one compound movement for the shoulders and then focus on the isolation movements. So this is the compound movement. Now again, with the pressing, you can either use dumbbells where you have to balance. So it all depends on how good you are at balancing the dumbbells. Some people can really focus directly and get a nice groove with the dumbbells, and that's fair enough. You could use that as an alternative. We've developed this pressing machine for the gym, which, as you see, focuses the shoulder movement in a converging movement, but also moves it forwards as well. One of the problems we find with bodybuilders is a lot of the bodybuilders of the 70s and 80s used to do a movement called press behind neck, where the bar starts off from behind the neck and they're pressing vertically. And we found that caused a lot of rotator cuff damage. The tendons of the shoulders started to deteriorate and get injured. So we want to try and move away from that to open out the movement a little bit more in front to cause less pressure on those tendons and less compression in the shoulder. So we've developed this machine which arcs forwards as well as converges, which the anterior delt tends to do anyhow. So this is probably as isolation of pressing movement as you get, as isolated a movement. So you can see as it comes down just below the ears, pauses there, not too low but low enough to get a good full range movement. If you go too low, you can damage a tendon on the top of the shoulder, put too much stress on it. And as he presses out, the bar converges slightly. So it really focuses on that front deltoid a bit more. So that's probably, I class that as the most ideal pressing movement for bodybuilders. So obviously this is a specialised machine, but you find some pressing movements tend to converge and tend to arc it forwards rather than backwards. If you do have a machine that arcs backwards, stay away from it. The other alternative is you could use a Smith machine or a barbell, but this would be the only compound movement I'd use for the shoulders. We've done the pressing movement, the compound movement. We're now going to go on to side laterals. Okay, so we're going to hit the side deltoid now. This is a specific machine to do that, the hammer strength. I have just adapted the position slightly, only because of my preference. If Charlotte just does the movement leaning backwards and can take it up to 90 degrees here, yeah. She's sat down a little bit too low there, but she's leaning back on that movement, and I always say that if you lean forward slightly more, you tend to emphasise the lateral delta a bit better. So I've had a block adapted, so I'll put that in now, and you should see the difference. So she leans forward more there, and that's more engaging the side laterals now. So instead of sitting back, leaning back, she's leaning a bit more forwards. Hold it at 90 degrees and down slowly. Pause at the bottom, hold at 90 degrees, then down slowly. This is a different adaptation as well, again to try and line up the side delt. So put her leaning forward a bit more, she takes it up to the side, you see that line of pull down there? That's more side deltoid than front deltoid. So it's a means of really just isolating that side deltoid a bit more for laterals. We'll show you, in the other room, we'll show you a technique that people use with dumbbells, which is wrong, and I'm trying to get away from that, trying to isolate the muscle a little bit more. So you could do these two movements, one after the other, for the side delts to really, it's a slightly different angle, okay? And then we would move on to rear deltoids. Now we could use the same machine for rear deltoids. And for this, you would bend forwards and take the elbows out to the side. So we'll demonstrate that now. So if you do the rear deltoid movement. So she's bent over, elbows against the pads, and this is hitting the rear deltoid here. So it's this line of pull now. Again, hold it at the top, and then a controlled descent. So that's about as much as you can isolate the rear deltoids. You do engage these muscles in the middle of the back as well, and it's a good idea to maybe just keep shoulders a little bit further away from your back routine, because again, it's very difficult not to overlap a little bit with muscle groups. But again, another reason why you want to hit each body part once a week, because you do get this overlap. And if you try and train body parts more than once a week, you can overtrain, and you're not giving the muscle enough time to recover. So we'll move on to dumbbell movements, which you can do if you've not got one of these machines. Okay, but that will be the side deltoid routine and the rear deltoid routine you do for your shoulders. We'll show the alternatives with the dumbbells now. So the best way to isolate the side deltoids with dumbbells is this particular exercise. So you notice he's on a slight incline, or a steep incline actually, so leaning forwards. As he takes the dumbbells out to the side to 90 degrees and holding there, he's got this line of pull down here. So this is the right way to do it, with a hold at the top and controlled descent. Pause at the bottom. So you're not swinging, you're not using momentum, he's getting a good hold. It's a really hard way of doing it, and you can't use a heck of a lot of weight, but the weight that you are using is directly engaging the side delts. And the final area in the shoulder that's going to work is the upper trapezius. Now, a lot of people, bodybuilders included, think that the upper trapezius just lies on top of the shoulder, and it's just this lump here, but it's quite extensive. It extends down here before it becomes middle trapezius. So you've got this part of the muscle to hit. Now, in order to hit that, you need to be bringing the torso